Welcome back to I Accidentally Married a Filipina. My name is Rob, but this is not my story. This is sent in to us from a Filipina named Anne Marie. And Anne Marie asked me, excuse me, I have to read this because I want to get it right because Anne Marie sent this to me. Anne Marie asked me to tell her story from her perspective because it has many ups and downs and even some content that might be difficult. But she wants to be honest, even where it makes her look bad. She did ask me to fill in the story so that it would sound good in English, so I'll be telling her whole story, and this is Anne Marie's story.
Anne Marie sat at the ferry terminal in Cebu waiting for sunrise and to catch the first ferry out to Tagbilaran in Bohol. She huddled up, clutching the bag of her only possessions, including her lockbox. When the port opened up, Anne Marie ordered her ticket at the counter. The attendant had her sign her name and destination and asked for 475 pesos for the trip to the Tagbilaran tourist port. She scrounged around her pockets and finally found her tiny key and opened her lockbox. Something was amiss, as Anne Marie had been saving and hoarding her money to the tune of 15,000 pesos, or 300 US. But the money was missing. She dumped her bag of belongings on the floor and searched every inch of her clothing, but there was no money. She looked into the small lockbox again as if it would magically appear, but only saw a small scrap of paper. She picked it up and held it to her face, and there was only one word written on it, and it said, "Rent." Anne Marie began sobbing uncontrollably and collapsed to the ground and felt as though she were to die right there in the port terminal. It was all over. Her uncle violated her once again. This was the end. If she didn't expire right then and there, she was going to walk over to the edge of the dock and throw herself into the sea. People were gathering behind Anne Marie, and a guard came up and helped her gather her things and led her out of line. The guard tried to console her, but she felt as though she was in a dream, and no matter how hard she tried to talk, her mouth wouldn't move. Anne Marie had stopped crying and picked up her bag and walked as if in a cloudy dream. Up ahead in her foggy dream, she saw Michael with his hand outstretched and beckoning for her to come to him. She desperately wanted to run, but her legs only responded slowly. She was getting closer, but Michael was fading into the fog, and with her last ounce of energy, she jumped towards him and put her arms around him and clutched him tightly to never let him get away again. She felt that old, familiar warmth, the same as she felt the first time he kissed her. It was real. It was pure. It was her one true love. Then she saw a bright light, and a crowd of people gathered around, and she was laying in a puddle of water. What had happened, she wondered. Where was Michael? Why am I soaking wet? She tried to sit up, and the guard helped her to a bench, and he told her she had grabbed her bag and with both arms and jumped into the sea. A good Samaritan from the ferry jumped in and fished her out just as she was disappearing from view. Anne Marie couldn't even cry anymore. She literally had nothing left. Nothing. How did it get this way? I am a good girl. How did I let all of this happen? I don't deserve this bad luck. Her self-hate was interrupted by the guard offering her some bread and a bottle of water. She just stuffed it in her bag as she did not have an appetite for food, let alone for living. The guard left her for a few minutes and came back to Anne Marie and took her by the arm and guided her towards the ferry to Tagbilaran and whispered something into the deckhand's ear, and the deckhand let her by. Anne Marie turned to the guard to thank him, but all she could do was bow her head towards him and then slumped into the first seat she could find. As the ferry puttered out of port on its all-day trip, she devised a plan. She would wait until the crew was busy working and the families were busy corralling their kids, and she would quietly move to the back of the ship and jump over the back railing where nobody would hear her over the chugging of the diesel engines. She just had to bide her time and choose the right moment. Anne Marie was jolted awake by the ferry hitting the dock at the Tagbilaran port. She had missed her chance to jump, but felt hungry, so she just sat on the ferry as all the people disembarked and ate the bread the guard had given her earlier that morning. Much to her surprise, her legs worked, and she was in full control of her body again. A deckhand came by and politely asked her to leave the ship so the next trip could board. She gathered her wet bag of belongings and moved through the rows of seats towards the exit. As she looked down, she saw a small sling bag and picked it up. She thought maybe she should turn in to the captain. She got to the gangplank and no captain. But an elderly Korean woman rushed up to her frantically, thanking Anne-Marie for finding her bag. In broken English, she again thanked her and shoved 1,000 pesos into Anne's hands, and as a reward, and then she turned around and hurried to her husband, awaiting her on the dock. Anne-Marie couldn't even be happy for half a week's wages falling into her lap, so she just blindly headed out towards the awaiting taxis. Anne-Marie only had one option as she headed to Panglao Island to try and track down her high school friend, Cherry, who, according to Facebook, lived near the airport and worked in a busy restaurant named Tiara's that was popular with the locals. She hoped Cherry could help her get on her feet. The taxi driver took Anne-Marie to her destination and relieved her of half her 1,000 pesos for the fare. Anne-Marie went into Tiara's and immediately saw Cherry. Cherry recognized Anne-Marie as well, and they caught up for a moment, but Cherry was busy, so she put Anne-Marie in a dark corner out of the way until they could really spend some time together. Cherry noticed her friend looked haggard and knew things weren't quite right, so she brought Anne-Marie a bowl of chicken adobo. Anne-Marie began to eat the warm soup, and she pulled the bottled water the guard had given her out of her bag and finished both in short order. Cherry still had a couple hours left on her shift, and once again, Anne-Marie fell asleep on the corner out of exhaustion. Anne-Marie woke up to the sound of a band belting out "Living on a Prayer," and as she came back to life, she felt almost human again. She went to the bathroom and freshened up after what seemed like 3 weeks and looked in the mirror at a face she did not recognize. She shook it off and walked out to look for Cherry. Cherry was sitting at Anne-Marie's corner table talking and laughing with a white-haired, fat-bellied foreigner. It suddenly dawned on Anne-Marie, now that she hadn't had her bearings straight, this isn't an upscale restaurant. This is a bar. Cherry waves Anne-Marie over to her corner and introduces her to her new friend, Larry. Larry smiled and shook her hand and offered to buy her a beer. Cherry encouraged Anne-Marie to get a free drink. She ordered an apple beer and thanked Larry and slowly sipped her apple beer and occasionally smiled weakly at Larry and waited for Cherry to finish her shift. Cherry checked her watch and quietly told Larry her shift was almost over. Larry asked Cherry something, and Cherry motioned for him to follow her. They walked to the restroom area and disappeared for a short time, and then Cherry emerged from the restroom area and grabbed Anne-Marie's hand, and they were on their way. They headed to a boarding house where Cherry rented a room. The room was sparse, a twin bed, a love seat, and between them was a dresser that had a big mirror on it where Cherry obviously fixed her makeup before work. On the other wall was a small folding table holding a rice cooker, a wash basin, a dorm refrigerator, and some noodles. There was a shared bathroom in the hallway that served the whole second floor. Cherry went to the small fridge and got them each a beer. As Cherry began removing her makeup in the wash basin, Anne-Marie asked Cherry what she had been doing since their time in the province. Cherry said she moved there for work because she loves the white beaches of Bohol, and there are plenty of foreigners visiting there, and she loves foreigners because they can be so generous if you just pay attention to them. Cherry quizzed Anne-Marie about her recent past, but to save face, she glossed over the bad parts and told her about her dad's illness and her working at a small bar, and she lied and said she heard about the beaches in Bohol and wanted to visit. But while she slept on the ferry, someone stole her money, and Cherry was the only person she knew on the island and was so thankful she was helping her. Cherry took her at her word, but her haggard appearance told Cherry a different story. But she left it alone as she could tell Anne-Marie was running from something. Cherry got 2 more beers, and Anne-Marie began to feel the comfort of talking to an old friend. Cherry told Anne-Marie she might be able to get her some hours at the bar since she has experience. Anne-Marie said she would think about it. Both girls were tired, and Anne-Marie slept on the love seat with her damp belongings drying on hangers in the window. When they woke up and showered, Cherry made some rice and vegetables in the rice cooker, and when they walked over to the white sand beach, and Cherry showed her where the best resorts were to walk the beach and search for rich foreign men. Cherry said Americans were the most generous, but the Aussies were the best looking. She liked the way the men from the UK talked, but the Italians were the best at lovemaking. Anne-Marie listened but offered no opinion, as men were never going to take advantage of her again. She just smiled and was happy for this beautiful change of scenery. A quick lunch at Jollibee and back to the boarding house for Cherry to get ready for work. As Cherry was leaving, she told Anne-Marie she should come by the bar later and that night so she could introduce her to the manager, and then she left for work. Anne-Marie relaxed for a while and got restless, so she went for a walk and ended up back at the beach. She took her sandals off and walked in the warm, crystal clear water, stopping occasionally to pick up a seashell and watch couples walk hand in hand down the beach, so much in love. A love she will never experience. Anne-Marie went back to the boarding house, showered, combed her hair, and borrowed shorts and a shirt from Cherry and went to the bar where Cherry introduced her to a very nice woman who managed the bar and said she would let Cherry know if she ever needs a shift cover. Cherry brought Anne-Marie another chicken adobo, and Anne-Marie protested because she had no money, but Cherry said the cook is her friend and not to worry about it. The adobo was delicious, and Anne-Marie almost felt back to her old self. Anne-Marie sat in the shadows of her corner table waiting for Cherry, and in walked Larry. Cherry ran and hugged Larry and led him over the corner table. Larry said he was delighted to see Anne-Marie again, and could he buy both girls a beer? Cherry answered for both and went to the bar and returned with a San Mig Light for Larry and 2 apple beers for the ladies. Cherry neglected her other duties and sat with Larry and laughed and giggled at all of his stories, all to the tune of 4 beers each. At the end of Cherry's shift, she and Larry walked towards the restroom area, and moments later, Cherry emerged, and after a short stop to see the manager, Cherry grabbed Anne-Marie's hand and off they went. On the way home, Cherry gave Anne-Marie 200 pesos. Anne-Marie looked puzzled at Cherry, and Cherry told her, "You sold 4 ladies' drinks, and this is your cut." This scenario played out every day for 8 days, and 200 pesos a night, not to work, seemed like a good deal. On the 9th night, Cherry said she had been walking the beach, and a very cute Filipino boy on vacation with money had bought her lunch and wanted her to go to dinner, and the bar manager said, "You can cover my shift. You will get your ladies' drinks cut, plus 300 pesos for the shift." Anne-Marie was unsure. Cherry took her over to the mirror and helped her with her hair and her makeup and put her in a denim short skirt and a V-neck blouse. Cherry said, "Look, you are beautiful. Just wait for Larry and give him a hug and laugh at his jokes and sell him beer." This seemed easy enough to Anne-Marie, and as she left for her shift, Cherry said, "And at the end of the night, charge Larry 500 pesos for a quick happy ending in the restroom." Immediately, Anne-Marie's heart fell into her stomach. She didn't cry for some reason. She just went to work. Right on schedule, Larry came in, and Anne-Marie mustered a smile and hugged Larry. He smelled of cheap cologne and whatever fish he had for dinner. Larry said he was very happy that Anne-Marie was here to entertain him. What a change of pace. A series of fake laughs from Anne-Marie, and 4 beers later, she knew what she had to do. She could not let her friend down. She asked Larry for 1 more apple beer as she needed the courage. When the time came, she just couldn't get up from her chair. This was a very important customer for Cherry, but she wouldn't budge. Larry seemed confused as Anne-Marie stared at the table. Anne-Marie summons her courage, and as she looks up, Cherry and her date walk in for a nightcap. Cherry comes over, and Larry whispers to her. Cherry excuses the girls to the ladies' room, and Anne-Marie apologizes and said she just can't. Cherry said, "Tell Larry to come back here, and you distract my date. This won't take 5 minutes." Anne-Marie quietly tells Larry the plan, and he goes to the rendezvous, and Anne-Marie tries to distract the date, and as he turns around, his eyes light up, and he says, "Anne-Marie, is that you?" "It's me, Michael, from the province." She shakes her head yes, and she suddenly has lost control of her vocal cords. He says, "You have grown up so pretty. I wondered what happened to you." She wanted to scream, "Please save me, please love me," but all she could do is grab his arm and pull him out of the bar and down the street. Michael was overjoyed to see her, so he didn't protest. Anne-Marie found her voice and said, "I never forgot you. I dreamed of you every night. Please save me. Michael, please save me." Michael took her hand and said, "I never forgot you. and he put his hand in hers, and they walked down the beach.
Michael is a good man with a good job, and we are going to be married next month. Thank you for listening to my story. I am sorry some parts were ugly, but from the ugly returned my one true love, Michael.